Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. For 4 years, North Carolina has had a divided government, a Republican legislature and a Democratic governor willing to veto the GOP's, quote, worst impulses. Those are his words. Now voters have a choice. Stick with the status quo or give Republicans the reins. WRAL state government reporter Travis Fain is here to discuss the GOP's prospects on Election Day, the party's policy goals, and what it all means for Democrats. Travis, good to see you again.
Yeah, nice to be here.
Travis, let's start with some context for the listeners who maybe don't follow North Carolina politics as closely as you do. What are the power dynamics in the state legislative and executive branches right now?
So right now, Republicans have a simple majority, so enough to pass whatever they want, but not enough to overturn a veto if Governor Roy Cooper, obviously a Democrat, vetoes what they have. They have to have some Democrats come along with them, and they have not been successful in overturning his vetoes since 2018, when Democrats broke the supermajority. A supermajority is enough to do what you want without worrying about whether the governor vetoes it or not.
And so basically, they pass legislation. Governor says, no, I don't like that. And how many votes do they typically need just to turn back that veto?
It's 3/5 in the state constitution. You have to have 3/5 of all members present and voting. And if everybody's present and voting in the House, that's 72 out of 120 members. And in the Senate, it's 30 out of 50 members. They're right there. Republicans are right there. Right now they have 69 in the House and they have 28 in the Senate. So they need 5 new seats, basically. It's not quite that simple because we redrew lines. Some people retired. So it's not just as simple as add in 5, but they need to net 5 seats. And Roy Cooper's veto is essentially irrelevant, or let's say much less relevant.
So voters could essentially tip the scales on November 8th on Election Day.
Right. And I mean, everybody, all 170 seats are up, all the House, all the Senate. Everybody's making individual decisions in their district, but it kind of adds up to this one big choice. Do you want the kind of government we've had the last 4 years, or do you want Republicans to be in control? And you're going to get things like more abortion regulations. Those will be more stringent. You might get some more tax cuts. We've already got tax cuts we're on like a glide path. Republicans passed and the governor signed, I think, 4 or 5 years worth of tax cuts. So we're on that glide path, but we might get some more. There are any number of issues where state law could change based on how this election goes.
So who has the edge going into November 8th?
Definitely Republicans have the edge. There is no way with the dynamics right now, with the way the maps look, that Democrats could win a majority. I think that's just totally off the table. If that happens, I will be shocked beyond anything I've seen in my career, I think. Republicans are going to have the majority. It's whether or not they can get these few districts here and there in suburban areas where they haven't run as well in recent years. That will decide the supermajority. And we think this is going to be a very strong cycle for Republicans, in part because of who the president of the United States is and the unpopularity of Democratic policies at the national level.
So what are some of the most competitive races right now in the legislature, that is?
So interestingly enough, there's several in Wake County. Right now, there is only one elected Republican in Wake County, Erin Perret. She's a House representative. All these districts we have in Wake County, and that's the only Republican in the state House, but we think Republicans could pick off a few. District 35, that's Terrence Everett is the state representative now. Got a guy named Fred Von Cannon is the Republican running against him. There's also a Libertarian in that race named Joseph Serio. That's a good chance for Republicans to pick one up. Also over in Alamance County, we got Representative Ricky Hurtado. He is a Democrat in the House. But the way that district looks, it's been very close in previous years if Republicans do better. Stephen Ross, who is a Republican and a former state representative, he may take Hurtado out. Back in Wake County, there are 2 really key state Senate races. Sidney Batch, kind of a rising star for the Democrats. She could get taken out by Mark Cavallaro, who is a business owner, former Marine, got an impressive resume. Republicans have really tried to recruit to the district. I mean, people maybe have an idea what a Republican is in their mind, but there's obviously a spectrum. And Republicans are really looking to pick off just these few suburban seats in Wake County, maybe in Mecklenburg County, down in the Wilmington area. That's why you're seeing so much advertising for state Senate seats specifically. That's where really the battleground is to take these supermajorities.
So if the Republicans gain a supermajority, what do they hope to accomplish?
So what I did was I reached out to leadership for Republicans and Democrats, and I said, look, give me 5 things, basically 5 promises, 5 policies that you will focus on, Republicans, if you get a supermajority. What do we get? If we give you power, what do we get? And I asked the Democrats the same basic thing, except I flipped it. Like, what are you worried that voters get if a Republican supermajority takes over? Republicans did not play ball. They would not give me that list. Democrats did, had a laundry list of complaints. So I just kind of, look, I follow this all the time. I can predict with some certainty what they're going to do based on what they've done in the past. Like I said earlier, you'll get more restrictive abortion rules. What that will look like, I don't know. Right now, we have a general ban, except for when there is a health emergency, after 20 weeks in North Carolina. Abortion becomes illegal after 20 weeks. That would probably move up. I don't know if it would be 15 weeks, which is a GOP-backed bill at the federal level, because, I mean, this is an issue in Congress as well. I don't know if it would be 12 weeks, which Senate President Pro Tem, that's the top Republican in the North Carolina Senate, Phil Berger. He has expressed some support for 12 weeks, although he has basically said there's a range that makes sense. I don't know where we're going to come down. I don't even know who all our members are going to be because these elections haven't happened yet. Could be a heartbeat bill, which is, in the neighborhood of 6 weeks? Depending on who's doing the counting. The Speaker of the House, Tim Moore, #1 Republican in the NC House, he has expressed support for a bill like that. So you get that. Looser gun laws, I would think, would be likely, although I don't know how far they'd go based on recent bills. There haven't been a lot of those bills. And then, CRT, critical race theory, that the Republicans have pushed to ban that discussion in schools. They have pushed to limit the way teachers can talk about sexuality and gender. These are bills that Governor Roy Cooper has vetoed. I think, and I'm going off memory here, always dangerous, the governor has vetoed something like 70, 75, 78 bills in the last 4 years, or maybe total. And then the last 4 years, they haven't been able to overturn any of those vetoes. So there's a lot of little things that would change.
We'll be back after the break with WRAL state government reporter Travis Fain. When we come back, we'll go more in depth on some of the other issues, and we'll talk about the prospects of legalized pot and gambling in the state. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm talking with WRAL state government reporter Travis Fain. We're talking about how the dynamics of the North Carolina General Assembly could change with the November 8th election. Travis wrote a comprehensive article about it on WRAL.com. Travis, even though the GOP didn't lay out their priorities, they've telegraphed their desires on a few other key issues. Tell me about voter rights, for instance.
Yeah, that's something the Democratic Party has particularly kind of sounded a warning on, basically saying that Republicans will pass more discriminatory voter suppression style measures. Your mileage is going to vary on that, but we can look to what Republicans have passed in the past. They are obviously in support of voter ID. There are 3 lawsuits blocking voters in North Carolina added a voter ID requirement to the state constitution. It's not enforced right now because of 3 lawsuits. So, voter ID, no doubt about it. There has been a lot of back and forth on how long we should accept absentee ballots. There was a bill that Republicans backed recently that basically would have said, if you're not in the military, your absentee ballot has to be in by election day or it doesn't count. That's something that the governor has vetoed. So I would expect something like that. Will they go further than that, they being Republicans there? I don't know. I certainly understand why people are concerned about it.
Why is that?
Well, there's a lot of election denialism in the Republican Party, right? You've got the leader of the Republican Party nationally, Donald Trump, who will not stop talking about how an election 2 years ago was rigged, and he has no evidence of that. So there is a push in a number of states for Republicans to take more power, potentially so that they can push their candidates through when they lose and they cry fraud. How strong that push is here, I don't think it's the same here as in other states. I would remind people, Republicans backed 17 days of early voting. Yes, they have backed voter ID, but there is a wide range of IDs that are accepted or would be accepted if that requirement. I want to be real clear. You don't have to show ID at the polls. There are 3 lawsuits blocking that right now. Right now, we do not have voter ID, but we do have the law. And it's fairly loose. I know Democrats will disagree with that, so feel free to consult a local Democrat for that analysis if you like it. But we kind of have to wait and see on some of this stuff. But if you look at the bills that Republicans have done in the past on this, a lot of them have had bipartisan support.
One thing that you noted in your article is that Democrats are really concerned about some social legislation, socially conservative legislation that might come through. You mentioned previously what we know as the Parents' Bill of Rights. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? And then also, if you could put it in the context of some older legislation that they're kind of using as almost like a case study of how this might hurt the state. And this is the Democrats' view, of course.
And I think you'll see, if Republicans get a supermajority, these are things you'll see, and these are things that will get the headlines because they are obviously hot-button issues. Republicans passed a bill, I believe it was last year, I'll be honest with you, the years run together, banning discussion of critical race theory. It's all these concepts about how formative racism has been in U.S. history. And Republicans, a lot of them see that as, well, that's running America down. It's just focusing on the wrong things. And Democrats say, no, I mean, it's basically recognizing that slavery was a thing, that Jim Crow was a thing, that racism continues to impact our lives. So that's something that the governor's veto that I promise you will come back if Republicans get a supermajority, is limiting the way teachers in the classroom can talk about that. Also in the classroom, there was a bill that passed the state Senate, but not the House. And the only reason it didn't pass the House, according to the Speaker of the House, was they knew Governor Cooper was going to veto it. So they said, we're not going to bother, but Speaker of the House, Tim Moore, specifically said, this is the kind of thing we could come back to. And so there are a number of social issues they would come back to with a supermajority. This particular bill did two main things. One, it said you can't have any mention in the curriculum, kindergarten through third grade, of sexuality, gender. A lot of people call this a don't say gay bill, but again, it's limited to kindergarten through third grade. Actually polls pretty well. We polled that and a number of other things here at WRAL. The other part of this bill, and arguably the more controversial part, was it said, regardless of grade, so all the way through high school, if a teacher or educator, if a student confides in them, like, hey, I think I might be gay, or hey, I think my gender identity is different. Kids who are kind of struggling through this issue and maybe not ready to tell their parents, the bill would have required the teacher to tell the parents. And Senator Phil Berger, again, the top Republican in the Senate, he and others said, look, we're not going to keep these secrets from parents. Parents deserve to know. And then what advocates on the other side will say is, well, not everybody has a loving parent who's going to react well when a teacher says, hey, your son or daughter is questioning their sexuality. I am required by law to inform you of such. What happens to that kid when they go home, I think is the question there. So that is a piece of legislation, the Parents' Bill of Rights. You can Google that. A lot of coverage will come up that we know will come back. And
Democrats are worried about that in large part because, at least they say, it could hurt the state's reputation, even the economy. Can you and they point to
House Bill 2.
Yeah.
So y'all remember years ago the transgender bathroom bill, or just the bathroom bill, the bill that arguably got Pat McCrory defeated when he was running for re-election. This is the bill that laid out, like, all right, you have to, at a public bathroom, use the bathroom of the gender you were assigned at birth, what it says on your birth certificate, your biological gender, however people want to talk about it. It was the bathroom bill, House Bill 2. It caused just this international backlash with boycotts, and like people said, oh, we're not doing our concerts here anymore. North Carolina was really in the headlines for a bill that was a Republican attempt to answer something that the city of Charlotte had done. I'm not going to relitigate all that, though. The bottom line is it was a black eye for the state. The bill was repealed, I think, something like 53 weeks later. And this is what Roy Cooper is talking about when he says, I need to be able to veto the Republican Party's worst impulses. That, I think, he would call one of their worst impulses, and it certainly had fallout. And so the question, forget parties for a second, or forget these two parties, which one is trying. Do you want one party to have control and get pulled to its more extreme positions, the right or the left, or do you want more divided government? Do you want them to have to work together, at least on some things? North Carolina's had a real run of economic successes. We're the number one state in the country, according to CNBC right now, to do business in. Republicans will say, yes, because we cut a bunch of taxes. Democrats will say, well, we helped a little bit too by keeping you from shooting us in the foot. So the question is, do you buy that? Do you want that? Or do you want, do you feel like Republican policies would be better for the state?
You also wrote about a few issues with bipartisan support that could see momentum with more Republicans in the state house. There's Medicaid, medical marijuana, sports gambling.
Potentially, yeah. These are issues that we kind of saw get close to the finish line this year, but there's more work to do. So medical marijuana, that's one that passed the Senate, not the House. Sports gambling, again, passed the Senate. Legalizing online sports gambling passed the Senate, not the House. Medicaid expansion, which would give taxpayer-paid health insurance to hundreds of thousands of the state's working poor, essentially, passed both the House and the Senate, but in wildly different forms. That's actually a House-Senate. That's their button heads there. The governor is like, look, just send me a bill. I'll sign it. And it's the House and Senate button heads. There is a theory that all these issues, which kind of require a bit more moderate Republican to sign off on them, could do better if Republicans get the supermajority, but only because that would mean suburban Republicans got elected. Does that make sense? So you've got more Republicans getting elected from suburban Wake County. They're less likely to be as conservative as a more rural Republican, because right now, I mean, the Republican Party has more support in the rural areas of the state. So that's a theory. But I mean, Democrats are going to vote for certainly Medicaid expansion and medical marijuana. It was the sports gambling that went down in part because a number of Democrats balked at it in the House, a number of Republicans too. So I don't know that either of those issues move much further ahead with a Republican supermajority, but it's more about the type of Republican that has to be successful in order to get the supermajority, and that type of Republican being more likely than it's value over replacement Republican for you baseball fans out there.
Well, I know you'll keep us up to speed as the election nears. Thanks, Travis.
Thanks for having me.
That's WRAL state government reporter Travis Fain. If you want to read his in-depth breakdown, visit the NC Capital section of WRAL.com. Thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email that's waiting for you in your inbox every morning with Triangle news, events, and headlines to get you ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.